Think for a moment about the people you have known who reached their 80s and 90s with their vitality intact. The ones who still traveled, who still tended their gardens, who still greeted each day with curiosity rather than complaint. Now think about the others. The ones who seemed to fade decades earlier, whose worlds gradually contracted until little remained but the routine of waiting. Here is a question worth considering. Was the difference between them simply a matter of luck? Or was it the result of choices made, patterns established, ways of living accumulated over decades? Most of us assume that aging is something that happens to us, an inevitable decline we can only hope to slow. But what if we have been looking at this backward? What if the way we age is not written in our genes, but built, day by day, by the lives we choose to live? There is a different way to understand this process, one that has nothing to do with quick fixes or the latest longevity headlines. And it begins with a single shift in perspective that changes everything that follows. You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging. The long view. Patterns of healthy aging across the lifespan. There is a question that becomes more interesting with each passing year. It is not a question about how to look younger or how to erase the evidence of time. It is a more fundamental question, one that has occupied philosophers and physicians for millennia. What does it mean to age well? For most of human history, this was not a question that many lived long enough to ask. The average life expectancy hovered in the range of 30 to 40 years well into the 19th century. Though this number is deceptive, it was driven down by high infant mortality and the ever-present threats of infectious disease. Those who survived childhood often lived into their 60s and 70s. But they were the exceptions. Today, the situation is almost completely reversed. Living into the 8th or 9th decade of life is no longer remarkable. It is statistically normal. The question has shifted from how to reach old age to how to experience those later decades with clarity, with vitality, with the physical capacity to continue doing the things that matter. This is a new problem. In evolutionary terms, our bodies were shaped by millions of years of life in environments completely unlike the one we now inhabit. The gap between the world we are designed for and the world we have created is, in many ways, the story of modern chronic disease. Understanding how to navigate this gap requires stepping back from the constant stream of nutritional headlines and supplement advertisements. It requires looking at the broader patterns that emerge when we study the people who have aged most successfully. These are not necessarily the people who have lived the longest, though many of them have. They are the people who have maintained their cognitive sharpness, their physical independence, their engagement with life, well into their later decades. When we look at what they have in common, certain themes appear consistently. These themes are not secrets. They are not hidden knowledge. They are patterns that have been observed across cultures and across centuries. Patterns that modern research continues to validate. This is an exploration of those patterns. It is not a list of rules to follow or a prescription to obey. It is an invitation to consider how the small choices we make each day accumulate over decades into the reality of how we age. Because aging is not something that happens to us suddenly at 65 or 70. It is a continuous process, a slow sedimentation of habits, exposures, and experiences. The body we inhabit at 80 is largely the body we have been building since 20. The nature of aging. What is actually happening? Before discussing strategies for aging well, it is helpful to understand what aging actually is at a biological level. This is not about cataloging every molecular mechanism. It is about grasping the general principles that govern why our bodies change over time. A useful way to think about aging is as a gradual loss of integration. A young organism is highly integrated. Its systems communicate effectively. Signals are sent and received. Waste products are cleared. Damaged components are repaired or replaced. As time passes, This integration begins to fray. Communication between cells becomes noisier. Repair processes become less efficient. The accumulation of minor damage begins to outpace the body's capacity to fix it. This happens for several interconnected reasons. One is simply the passage of time and the constant exposure to the environment. Every breath we take introduces oxygen into our cells. And while oxygen is essential for life, it is also a reactive molecule that can cause damage over time. This is not a flaw in design. It is a trade-off. The same process that allows us to extract energy from food also creates byproducts that must be managed. For most of our early years, the management systems handle this effortlessly. Eventually, the balance shifts. Another factor is the gradual shortening of structures called telomeres, which cap the ends of our chromosomes. Each time a cell divides, these caps become slightly shorter. When they become too short, the cell can no longer divide. It becomes senescent, meaning it stops replicating but does not die. These senescent cells accumulate with age and can cause problems by secreting inflammatory signals that affect the healthy cells around them. Then there is the issue of protein maintenance. Proteins are the workhorses of the cell, responsible for nearly every biological task. To function correctly, they must be folded into precise three-dimensional shapes. Over time, proteins can become misfolded or clumped together. Cells have systems for clearing out these damaged proteins, but these systems also become less efficient with age. The accumulation of protein aggregates is a feature of many age-related conditions. Mitochondria, the tiny structures inside cells that generate energy, also change with age. They become less numerous and less efficient. This means cells have less energy available for repair and maintenance. It is a downward cycle. Less energy leads to less repair, which leads to more damage, which further impairs mitochondrial function. What is important to understand about all of these processes is that they are not happening in isolation. They are interconnected. Inflammation, for example, plays a role in nearly all of them. Low-level chronic inflammation, sometimes called inflammaging, is now recognized as a central feature of the aging process. This is not the acute inflammation of an infection or injury, which is a healthy response. It is a smoldering, systemic inflammation that quietly damages tissues over decades. The good news, if it can be called that, is that these processes are not fixed. They are influenced by our behaviors and our environments. They can be accelerated or slowed. This is where the practical dimension of aging well begins. Because while we cannot stop time, we can influence the rate at which these underlying processes unfold. Movement as a biological signal. Of all the strategies available for influencing the aging process, movement is arguably the most powerful. This is not because exercise burns calories or builds muscle, though it does both. It is because movement sends signals throughout the body that coordinate nearly every aspect of cellular function. To understand why, it helps to consider the environment in which our bodies evolved. For the vast majority of human history, physical activity was not a choice. It was a requirement of survival. Finding food, gathering water, escaping threats, building shelter, all of these required movement. The human body was shaped by this constant demand. Our physiology expects physical activity in the same way it expects oxygen and food. When we are physically active, we are not just using our muscles. We are activating systems throughout the body. Muscle contractions release molecules that travel through the bloodstream and communicate with the brain, the liver, the fat tissue, the pancreas. These molecules, sometimes called myokines, are part of a complex signaling network that helps regulate metabolism, inflammation, and even cognitive function. Consider what happens during a simple activity like walking. The large muscles of the legs and hips contract rhythmically. This contraction helps pump blood back toward the heart, reducing the workload on the cardiovascular system. It also increases blood flow to the brain, delivering oxygen and nutrients. The mechanical loading on bones stimulates the cells that maintain bone density. The joints are lubricated. The balance systems are challenged and refined. The brain must coordinate all of this, maintaining awareness of the body in space. Now consider what happens when this signal is absent. When we sit for prolonged periods, the muscles are quiet. The signaling molecules are not released. Blood pools in the lower extremities. Metabolic processes slow. The brain receives less stimulation. Over time, the body interprets this lack of demand as a signal that certain capacities are no longer needed. Muscle tissue is gradually broken down. Bone density declines. Cardiovascular efficiency decreases. This is not a failure of the body. It is an appropriate response to the information it is receiving. The body is efficient. It will not maintain what it is not asked to use. This is why movement is best understood not as a discretionary activity, but as a form of communication. Every time we move, we are telling our bodies what we expect from them. We are signaling that we still need strong muscles, dense bones, responsive hearts, and agile brains. For those in the second half of life, the type of movement matters less than the consistency. The goal is not to achieve athletic performance. It is to maintain capacity. This means preserving the ability to perform the activities of daily living without assistance. It means being able to carry groceries, to rise from a chair without using hands, to walk up a flight of stairs without becoming breathless, to catch oneself if balance is lost. These capacities do not decline because we age. They decline because we stop challenging them. The principle is simple. Capacity is maintained at the level of demand. If we regularly ask our bodies to lift a certain weight, they will maintain the strength to lift that weight. If we regularly ask our bodies to walk a certain distance, they will maintain the endurance to walk that distance. If we stop asking, the capacity gradually disappears. This principle applies across all domains of physical function. Strength, endurance, balance, flexibility. Each responds to the demands placed upon it. This is why the most effective approach to movement is not found in any particular exercise program. It is found in the consistent, lifelong habit of remaining physically engaged with the world. There is also a deeper dimension to this. Movement influences the brain in ways that are only beginning to be understood. The hippocampus, a region critical for memory formation, is particularly responsive to physical activity. Studies have shown that regular aerobic exercise can increase the volume of the hippocampus, effectively reversing age-related shrinkage by 1 to 2 years. This is not about preventing dementia, though that may be a downstream effect. It is about maintaining the cognitive infrastructure that allows us to navigate our lives. The practical implication is straightforward. Find ways to move that are sustainable over decades. Walking is perhaps the most underrated form of exercise. It is accessible, requires no equipment, and can be done anywhere. It provides enough stimulus to maintain basic cardiovascular function and lower body strength. For those who can, adding resistance training provides additional benefits for muscle and bone. Activities that challenge balance, such as Tai Chi or simple standing exercises, help maintain the reflexes that prevent falls. The specifics are less important than the pattern. The pattern is one of regular, consistent movement integrated into daily life, not confined to scheduled exercise sessions. The metabolic landscape, alongside movement, the way we fuel our bodies shapes the aging process in profound ways. This is not primarily about weight or appearance, though those may change. It is about the metabolic environment we create within our bodies and how that environment influences the cellular processes described earlier. Metabolism is often discussed as if it were simply about burning calories. In reality, it is a vast network of chemical reactions that convert food into energy and building blocks for the body. At the center of this network sits a hormone called insulin. Insulin is one of the most powerful signals in the body, directing how nutrients are used and stored. When we eat, particularly when we eat carbohydrates, blood sugar rises. The pancreas releases insulin in response. Insulin tells cells to take up this sugar from the bloodstream. It tells the liver to store excess sugar as glycogen. It tells fat cells to store energy. It is a storage hormone, essential for managing the influx of nutrients. The problem that emerges for many people as they age is not with insulin itself, but with the cell's response to it. Cells can become less sensitive to insulin's signal. This is called insulin resistance. When this happens, the pancreas must produce more insulin to achieve the same effect. Blood insulin levels rise. This creates a metabolic environment that influences many aspects of aging. High insulin levels promote inflammation. They signal the body to store fat, particularly around the abdomen. They interfere with the cellular cleanup processes that normally remove damaged components. They are associated with faster cognitive decline. In essence, a state of chronic high insulin accelerates many of the underlying processes of aging. This is not a binary condition. Insulin resistance exists on a spectrum. It develops gradually over years or decades, often without obvious symptoms. The first sign may be a slight increase in fasting blood sugar, or weight that becomes harder to lose, or energy that flags in the afternoon. These are subtle signals that the metabolic environment is shifting. The dietary factors that influence insulin sensitivity are reasonably well understood. Highly processed carbohydrates, those that are quickly broken down into sugar, provoke the largest insulin response. These include foods made with refined flour, sugar-sweetened beverages, and many processed snacks. When consumed regularly, they keep insulin levels elevated and contribute to the cycle of resistance. Fiber, by contrast, slows the absorption of sugar and blunts the insulin response. Vegetables, legumes, and whole foods in their natural state contain fiber that moderates the metabolic impact of meals. Protein and fat also slow digestion and do not themselves provoke large insulin releases. This is where the quality of food becomes relevant. Two meals with the same number of calories can have completely different metabolic effects. A meal of white bread and jam will produce a rapid spike in blood sugar and a large insulin response. A meal of vegetables, olive oil, and fish will produce a gradual rise in blood sugar and a modest insulin response. The body experiences these meals very differently. For those concerned with long-term health, the goal is not to eliminate insulin, but to maintain sensitivity to it. This means creating an eating pattern that does not constantly challenge the system with large glucose loads. It means prioritizing foods that release their energy slowly. It means understanding that the quality of carbohydrates matters more than the quantity. There is also a temporal dimension to metabolism. The body operates on rhythms. Insulin sensitivity is higher earlier in the day and declines in the evening. This is one reason why eating large meals late at night can be more metabolically challenging than eating the same meal earlier. The body is simply less prepared to handle the influx of nutrients. Some research suggests that extending the daily period without food, sometimes called time-restricted eating, can improve metabolic health. The idea is not to starve, but to concentrate eating into a window that aligns with the body's natural rhythms. This gives the digestive system a rest and allows insulin levels to drop for a sustained period each day. The evidence is still developing, but the pattern is consistent with what we know about human history. For most of our evolutionary past, food was not available around the clock. Periods without eating were normal. The body has mechanisms for functioning in the fasted state, mechanisms that are rarely activated in modern eating patterns. The metabolic lens also helps explain why muscle mass matters for aging. Muscle is metabolically active tissue. It consumes glucose, helping to keep blood sugar stable. More muscle mass means more capacity to clear glucose from the bloodstream without requiring high insulin levels. This is one reason why resistance training complements dietary strategies for metabolic health. None of this requires perfection. The occasional meal of refined carbohydrates is not going to derail decades of health. What matters is the pattern, the general tendency of eating habits over time. The body is remarkably resilient. It can handle occasional challenges. It is the constant, daily exposure to high glycemic, low-fiber foods that gradually shifts the metabolic landscape toward insulin resistance and its downstream effects. The information in food, beyond the metabolic effects of macronutrients. There is another dimension to food that deserves attention. Food carries information. This is not a mystical concept. It is a biological reality. Plants, in particular, contain thousands of compounds that are not classified as vitamins or minerals, but that nevertheless influence how our cells function. These compounds, often called phytochemicals, are produced by plants for their own purposes. They help plants defend against pests, resist disease, and manage environmental stress. When we eat plants, these compounds interact with our own biology in complex ways. Some of them activate protective genes. Some of them modulate inflammation. Some of them support the body's natural detoxification systems. The colors of fruits and vegetables are often indicators of these compounds. The deep red of tomatoes comes from lycopene, which has been studied for its effects on prostate health. The orange of carrots and sweet potatoes comes from beta-carotene, which the body can convert to vitamin A. The purple of blueberries and eggplants comes from anthocyanins, which are potent antioxidants. The green of leafy vegetables comes from chlorophyll, but these same vegetables contain lutein and zeaxanthin, compounds that concentrate in the retina and support eye health. What is notable about these compounds is that they work synergistically. Isolating them in supplement form rarely produces the same benefits as consuming them in whole foods. The prevailing theory is that these compounds evolved to work together in the combinations found in nature. Taking a single compound out of context may not provide the same effect, and in some cases may even be counterproductive. This is why dietary patterns that emphasize a wide variety of plant foods are consistently associated with better health outcomes. The Mediterranean diet, which has been extensively studied, is not just about olive oil and fish. It is also about the variety of vegetables, fruits, legumes, and herbs that accompany them. The traditional diets of Okinawa, another region known for longevity, are similarly plant-heavy, with a particular emphasis on sweet potatoes and green vegetables. For those in the second half of life, this variety becomes increasingly important. The body's protective systems require adequate supplies of these phytochemicals to function optimally. The antioxidant systems that neutralize reactive molecules depend on compounds that must come from the diet. The enzymes that support detoxification require cofactors found in plants. The gut bacteria that influence immune function and inflammation thrive on the fiber and polyphenol that plants provide. This is not about eating specific superfoods or following rigid rules. It is about dietary diversity. It is about ensuring that the plate contains color, that meals are not monotonous, that the full range of plant compounds has an opportunity to enter the body. A simple practice is to aim for variety across the week rather than worrying about any single meal. If vegetables appear in multiple colors over the course of several days, The body is likely receiving a broad spectrum of these informational compounds. There is also the question of how food is grown. Plants produce many of these protective compounds in response to stress. A plant that is grown in rich soil with abundant water and no threats may produce fewer phytochemicals than a plant that has to defend itself. This is one reason why some research suggests that organically grown produce may have higher levels of certain compounds, though the evidence is mixed. The more important point is that farming practices influence the nutritional quality of food, even if the differences are subtle. Animals also concentrate compounds from their environment. The fat of grass-fed animals contains different fatty acids and more fat-soluble vitamins than the fat of grain-fed animals. Fish that feed on algae and smaller fish accumulate omega-3 fats that are less abundant in farmed fish-fed grain-based diets. Eggs from chickens that forage outdoors have a different nutrient profile than eggs from chickens confined to barns. These differences may be small in any single meal, but they accumulate over decades. The practical implication is not that everyone must eat only organic, grass-fed, wild-caught foods. Such an approach is not accessible to everyone, and the stress of striving for perfection may outweigh any nutritional benefit. The implication is that quality matters, and that when possible, choosing foods that are closer to their natural state provides more of the informational compounds that support healthy aging. The nervous system and the stress response. The body does not exist in isolation from the mind. The connection between psychological states and physical health is not a matter of wishful thinking. It is a matter of physiology. The nervous system and the endocrine system are in constant communication, translating thoughts and emotions into chemical signals that influence every organ. At the center of this communication is the stress response. When the brain perceives a threat, it activates a cascade of hormones designed to prepare the body for action. The sympathetic nervous system releases adrenaline, increasing heart rate and blood pressure. The adrenal glands release cortisol, mobilizing energy stores and suppressing systems that are not immediately needed for survival, such as digestion and reproduction. This response is essential for dealing with acute challenges. It becomes problematic when it is chronically activated. The human stress response evolved to handle short-term physical threats, encounters with predators, conflicts with rivals, environmental dangers. Once the threat passed, the system returned to baseline. In modern life, the threats are often not physical and they do not pass. They are psychological and they persist. Deadlines, financial concerns, relationship tensions, news cycles. These keep the stress response activated for extended periods. Chronic elevation of cortisol has effects that overlap substantially with the aging process. It promotes inflammation. It impairs memory by damaging neurons in the hippocampus. It contributes to insulin resistance. It suppresses immune function. It accelerates the shortening of telomeres. In effect, chronic stress creates a physiological environment that mimics and accelerates aging. The relationship works in the other direction as well. The way we think about aging influences how we age. This is not about positive thinking magically changing biology. It is about how beliefs shape behavior and how behavior shapes physiology. People who view aging as a period of decline may be less likely to engage in the physical and social activities that maintain function. People who view aging as a time of continued growth may remain more active and engaged, preserving their capacities longer. The practical question is how to modulate the stress response without withdrawing from life. Complete avoidance of stress is neither possible nor desirable. Some stress, called eustress, is actually beneficial. It challenges us and promotes growth. The goal is not zero stress. It is recovery. It is the ability to return to baseline after challenges, rather than remaining in a state of chronic activation. Recovery happens through activities that engage the parasympathetic nervous system, the branch of the nervous system that promotes rest and digestion. Sleep is the most fundamental of these. During sleep, the brain clears metabolic waste, consolidates memories, and repairs cellular damage. Chronic sleep deprivation elevates cortisol, impairs glucose metabolism, and is associated with faster cognitive decline. The consistency of sleep matters as much as the duration. Erratic sleep patterns confuse the body's internal clock and disrupt the rhythms that coordinate physiological processes. Beyond sleep, activities that induce a state of focused calm can support recovery. This might be meditation for some, walking in nature for others, or simply sitting quietly without distraction. The common element is a shift away from the constant vigilance of the stress response toward a state of safety and rest. The body cannot distinguish between a real threat and an imagined one. It responds to the signal. When we deliberately cultivate states of calm, we are sending the signal that the threat has passed, allowing the recovery systems to activate. Social connection also plays a role here. The presence of trusted others dampens the stress response. Isolation has the opposite effect. This is one reason why loneliness is associated with poorer health outcomes across virtually every measure. It is not simply that lonely people are sad. It is that their nervous systems are in a chronic state of low-grade vigilance, responding to the absence of social safety. The integration of these factors, sleep, stress recovery, social connection, into a coherent approach to aging is not about adding more items to a to-do list. It is about recognizing that the nervous system is part of the body, and that its state influences every aspect of physiology. Strategies that support nervous system regulation are not optional extras. They are foundational to the same degree as movement and nutrition. Patterns across populations. When researchers study populations with high proportions of healthy older adults, certain patterns emerge that transcend cultural differences. These are not experimental interventions. They are observations of how people actually live in places where reaching advanced age in good health is relatively common. One such pattern is the integration of movement into daily life. In these populations, people do not go to the gym. They move because movement is part of their routines. They walk to visit neighbors. They tend gardens. They perform manual tasks as part of their daily activities. The movement is not intense by athletic standards, but it is constant. It accumulates over the course of each day and across the lifespan. Another pattern is the social valuing of older adults. In cultures where elders are respected and included, older people remain engaged. They have roles. They contribute. This engagement provides a reason to maintain function. It also provides the social connection that buffers stress. The contrast with societies that marginalize older adults is stark. When people are expected to withdraw and become invisible, they often do. Their health declines accordingly. Dietary patterns in these populations share common features. They are plant-centered. Meat is present but not central. Meals are eaten in company, not alone and not rushed. Portion sizes are moderate. The foods are minimally processed. There is no single longevity diet that applies across all cultures, but there are common principles. Whole foods, plant variety, moderate intake, and social context. These populations also tend to have what researchers call a sense of purpose. This is difficult to quantify, but appears consistently in interviews and surveys. People have reasons to get up in the morning. They have roles that matter to them and to others. This purpose may come from work, from family, from community involvement, or from personal projects. The common element is forward direction, a sense that life is still unfolding and that they have something to contribute. The patterns observed in these populations are not easily reducible to individual factors. They are systems. The movement, the diet, the social connection, the purpose, these reinforce each other. Someone who tends a garden is moving their body, producing food, and engaging with the natural world. Someone who shares meals with others is eating and connecting simultaneously. Someone who has a role in the community has a reason to stay active and engaged. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. This systems perspective is important because it suggests that isolated interventions may be less effective than lifestyle changes that address multiple dimensions simultaneously. Adding a daily walk is good. Adding a daily walk with a friend is better because it combines movement with social connection. Growing some of your own food is even better because it combines movement, nutrition, and purpose. The goal is not to optimize each factor separately, but to create a life in which healthy behaviors are natural consequences of how one lives. The environmental context. The body does not exist in a vacuum. It exists in an environment that shapes its function in ways both obvious and subtle. The air we breathe, the water we drink, the light we see, the chemicals we encounter, all of these influence the aging process. Air quality is perhaps the most obvious environmental factor. Particulate matter from combustion enters the lungs and crosses into the bloodstream, where it promotes inflammation throughout the body. Studies have linked air pollution to accelerated cognitive decline and increased cardiovascular risk. For those living in urban areas, this is not a theoretical concern. It is a daily exposure that accumulates over decades. Light exposure regulates the body's internal clocks. Bright light in the morning helps synchronize these clocks, promoting better sleep and metabolic function. Light at night, particularly the blue light from screens, disrupts this synchronization. The body interprets it as daylight, suppressing melatonin and shifting rhythms later. Over time, this disruption is associated with poorer health outcomes across multiple systems. The chemical environment has changed dramatically in recent decades. Thousands of synthetic compounds have been introduced that did not exist for most of human history. Some of these, like the pesticides used in agriculture, are designed to be biologically active. Others, like the plasticizers in food packaging, leach into food and water. The long-term effects of chronic low-level exposure to these compounds are not fully understood, but the precautionary principle suggests that minimizing exposure where possible is reasonable. None of this is meant to induce fear or anxiety. The body has sophisticated systems for handling environmental challenges. The liver and kidneys work continuously to neutralize and eliminate compounds that should not be there. But these systems have limits, and they become less efficient with age. Supporting them by reducing unnecessary exposures is a logical approach. This might mean choosing foods grown with fewer pesticides when possible. It might mean using ventilation when cooking to reduce indoor air pollution. It might mean being mindful of light exposure in the evening and seeking natural light during the day. It might mean filtering drinking water. These are not dramatic changes, but they reduce the total burden on the body's defense systems, freeing capacity for other tasks. The integration of strategies. At this point, it may seem that healthy aging requires attending to an overwhelming number of factors: movement, nutrition, stress, sleep, social connection, purpose, environment. The list is long. But this is where the systems perspective becomes useful. These factors are not independent. They interact. Improving one often improves others. Consider the example of walking. A daily walk improves cardiovascular function and muscle strength. It exposes the body to natural light, supporting circadian rhythms. If done with a companion, it provides social connection. If done in a natural setting, it reduces stress. A single activity addresses multiple factors simultaneously. The same is true for gardening, for cooking with others, for participating in group activities. The most powerful strategies are those that integrate across domains. This is also why rigid prescriptions often fail. Telling someone they must exercise for exactly 30 minutes at a specific intensity, eat precisely measured portions of specific foods, and meditate for exactly 20 minutes twice daily creates a burden that few can sustain. The more effective approach is to understand the principles and then find ways to embody them that fit individual circumstances and preferences. For one person, this might mean joining a walking group that meets in a park. For another, it might mean taking up ballroom dancing with a spouse. For another, it might mean volunteering for an organization that involves physical activity. The form matters less than the presence of the underlying principles. Movement, social connection, purpose, engagement with the environment. The same is true for nutrition. Understanding that plant variety matters is more useful than memorizing a list of superfoods. Understanding that metabolic health depends on insulin sensitivity is more useful than counting grams of carbohydrates. Understanding that food quality is about more than calories is more useful than obsessing over portion sizes. The principles guide choices, they do not dictate them. This approach also accommodates the reality that life is not static. What works at 50 may not work at 70. Circumstances change. Capacities change. Preferences change. The principles remain relevant, but their application shifts. The goal is not to find a single perfect routine and maintain it unchanged for decades. The goal is to remain engaged with the process, continuously adapting as life unfolds. The long view. There is a tendency in discussions of health to focus on the short term. Lose weight in 10 weeks. Lower cholesterol in 30 days. Transform your body in 3 months. This framing is understandable. It appeals to the desire for quick results. But it is fundamentally misaligned with how aging actually works. Aging is not a short-term process. It is the accumulation of effects over decades. The choices made at 30 shape the body at 60. The habits established at 50 influence the capacity at 80. This is not a reason for despair. It is a reason for patience. Small differences, sustained over long periods, produce large outcomes. The person who walks daily for 40 years has walked enough to circle the earth multiple times. The person who eats vegetables at most meals has consumed thousands of pounds of protective compounds. The person who maintains social connections has had millions of interactions that buffered stress and provided meaning. This long view also provides perspective on the inevitable challenges. Everyone experiences periods of less movement, less ideal eating, more stress. These are not failures. They are part of being human. What matters is the overall trajectory, not the occasional deviation. The body is resilient. It can recover from short-term challenges. It is the sustained pattern that shapes the outcome. There is also the question of what we are trying to achieve. If the goal is simply to live as long as possible, the strategies might look different. But for most people, the goal is not maximum lifespan. It is health span, the period of life lived in good health, with preserved function and cognitive clarity. It is the ability to continue doing what matters. It is independence. It is engagement. It is quality of life, not just quantity of years. This shifts the focus from avoiding death to maintaining capacity. It asks not how long we can live, but how well we can live for as long as we are here. And the answer, supported by decades of research and centuries of observation, is that the same factors that support longevity also support quality of life. Movement, nutrition, stress management, social connection, purpose. These are not just about adding years. They are about making the years that are added worth living. The evidence for this is not found in any single study. It is found in the consistency of observations across populations and across time. The people who age best are not those who have discovered a secret. They are those who have, often without explicitly intending to, lived in ways that align with the body's design. They have moved regularly. They have eaten real food. They have stayed connected to others. They have had reasons to get up in the morning. They have not been overwhelmed by chronic stress. They have lived in environments that supported, rather than undermined, their biology. This is not a prescription. It is a description. It is an invitation to consider how our own lives align with these patterns and where small adjustments might be made. Because the future is not fixed. It is being built, day by day, choice by choice, by the way we live now. The body we will inhabit in 20 years is the body we are creating today. Understanding this is not a burden. It is an opportunity. It means that within the limits of genetics and circumstance, we have influence over our own trajectory. We are not passive passengers on an inevitable decline. We are active participants in a process that unfolds over decades. The question is not whether we will age. The question is how. The body we will inhabit 20 years from now is not a mystery. It is being built by the choices we make today, by the movement we do or do not do, by the food we do or do not eat, by the connections we maintain, by the purpose we carry forward. This is not a burden. It is an invitation. It means that within the limits we all face, we have influence over our own trajectory. We are not passive passengers on an inevitable decline. We are active participants in a process that unfolds over decades. If this perspective has sparked something in you, some reflection on your own path, we would welcome your thoughts in the comments. And if you would like to continue exploring the patterns of healthy aging, you will find more wisdom waiting in other videos throughout this library. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.